Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year from the Queen Anne's County Public School System. We are here today because we're going to be talking about middle states. Middle states is a process where it's an accreditation process that we are going through as a school system, and there are 12 subcommittees. And in these subcommittees, what we do is we take a look at a number of standards and accreditation standards to determine where we stand as a school, to how we measure as school system, and how we measure up. I'm here today with Mr. Willie Waits, who is the supervisor of science for the Queen Anne's County School System. We're going to be talking about his particular subcommittee. Now, Mr. Waits and I both joined the central office at the same time back in the summer of 2011, right, Mr. Waits?
That is correct.
Yes. And we were both at Kennesaw High School, and now we're here. And one of our first opportunities was to work on the middle states as subcommittee chairs, and we both jumped at the chance to be chairs, didn't we, Mr. Waits?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. We are both subcommittee chairs, so you'll be hearing my story in the near future. I'm sure you can't wait for that. And Mr. Waits is going to be talking about his area, which is student life and student activities. Well, Mr. Waits, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I am doing just great. Are you having a good year so far?
Oh, I am. And, going through this process was a great experience.
Yes. Well, I know that you didn't do this by yourself.
No.
And I know that there are people that sort of helped you with the process. Who, in particular, was very helpful to you as far as being on your committee or.
There were several people that were on the committee. When I first got this assignment, basically what I did was contact people at the school level to participate and do the review. We had, for example, a director of athletics. We also had a coordinator of our after-school programs. We had members, sponsors of clubs, teachers, academic deans, teacher specialists at all levels to participate.
Mm-hmm. And it was your job to sort of take the entire standard, take control of the subcommittee. And I can see this is your report here. See how thick it is? Very, very thorough job, obviously, that Mr. Waits has done. And it was your job to take this report and sort of organize it and put it together. So, how did you organize your work, and what did you do first?
Well, first, I had called together the committee, and we sat down and I explained to them the purpose of the evaluation that we had to go through. We took a look at the middle states documents, the standards, the qualities of indicators, and then we sat down and after looking at the indicators and the objectives, the purpose that we had to do, we came up with an action plan. How are we going to evaluate what data we were going to use to evaluate whether Queen Anne's County Public School System were offering programs that were non-discriminatory, and that also was a balance between academics and non-academics, and offer kids a way to have that social contact. And we came up with a plan of looking at survey data that was completed by teachers, students, and also parents. And we had to mesh that with the document, the middle states assessment document, because there was a difference in terms of variation of how it was scored. So that's, and we had to draw some, after compiling all that, we had to draw some conclusion, and then had to gather some artifacts to support the conclusions that we drew from the data itself.
Well, that does sound like a lot of work.
Yes.
Now, so what specific things were you looking at? You're looking at student life and student activities. I mean, I can think of SGA. I can think of, you mentioned Director of Athletics, Dave Cooper. You mentioned sports. What other things were you looking at?
We basically were looking at the number of activities that the Queen Anne's County Public School System offer kids, whether they were giving them an opportunity, a balanced opportunity to participate in those extracurricular activities. Sort of looking at the holistic nature of student school life. Those activities that are not academic, but still linked and balanced that activities. And we were looking at sports activities. We looked at the different clubs that were there, and this was high school through high school through elementary, or elementary through high school, and looked at what was offered, how many students were participating in those activities, and the question was centered around whether the school system is supporting those type of activities for our students.
And what did you find out?
We found out that based upon the data, we found out that 80% of the school staff, the students, and also parents believe and also support Queen Anne's County Public Schools. The system itself also supports those activities. About 80% or better in making sure that students have access to those activities.
Mm-hmm. So, would you say, as the chairperson of your subcommittee, that the Queen Anne's County School System has met the standards for accreditation?
I would say they have, based upon the data, based upon the responses that we've gotten from our stakeholders. I would say definitely Queen Anne's County Public Schools meet the standard and the indicators of quality for the middle states.
So, what would you say, maybe speaking for your other committee members, what would you say that your team, something that you learned that kind of stands out during the process that you didn't know? I mean, you've been in this county a long time, and as I have, but maybe something that you came across that you hadn't thought of or learned.
One of the things, looking at the middle state process, it is an easy process that we went through. The documents that were presented by middle states were clearly, and we could understand those documents. The standard itself was clear. The indicators were definitely clear, and it made our process very easy in terms of gathering the material. In terms of looking at the system itself, within the system itself, I was amazed at the number of activities that are being offered to students. And even at the middle school and elementary level, majority of the activities are offered at the high school, but across the board, there are activities that are going on that are being sponsored by volunteers, that are being sponsored by individual teachers after school.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask one last question, and I would say this, that we know when students, all of our students at all levels, are able to make a connection to their school, then that helps them, that helps reduce truancy, it helps student achievement. And so could you talk about the importance of students getting involved in these activities? Were you able to make that connection during your...
That came up in our discussion with the committee, that the importance of the student activities to student life, of keeping students interested in school, and we find that we found out that there was a correlation between student academic success as related to student life, the activities they are involved. If we can keep them in school, we keep them in classes, we keep them learning.
All right, well said. Well, listen, that was great, and I think you guys have done a tremendous job. You've worked hard. We're very proud of the work that you've done, because we're, of course, very proud of the Queen Anne's County school system. We believe that we have a great staff of people that work really hard, and our students are just, we think they're the best anywhere. So that concludes this segment on student life and student activities, which is Standard 11, and hope you'll come back for another segment. I want to thank you for your time and for being here today and for all that great information.
Thank you for having me.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of the Middle States Subcommittee information. These are segments that we're doing for QAC-TV about the Excellence by Design process that we are going through in the Queen Anne's County school system. Now, I have with me today a very honored guest, Dr. Lloyd Taylor, who is the principal of Sudlersville Elementary School. And he's here for a reason. But first of all, welcome,
Thank you,
Dr.
Brad.
Taylor. How are you doing today?
Glad to be here.
Good, great. So Lloyd, if you, you were asked to be a subcommittee chair, and as I was myself, and I know you were just as thrilled as I was to take the lead, because this is really this is a process that we have a school system that we're all very proud of. And this is a chance to put our best foot forward and really take a look at what we're doing and a lot of the great things that we're doing, and find out if we have any challenges or things we need to work on. Again, it is a process, and it's something that we're going through, and we're going to continue to go through during the 2012 year and beyond. Now, the particular standard that you have is Standard 6, which is System, Climate, and Organization. Now, what does that mean?
Well, what they're looking for here is what the climate, what the various stakeholders in the system and outside the system, parents, teachers, staff members, students, what they feel about the school system, the climate of the school system. Is it a healthy one? Is it a positive one? And if so, what they're asking is how we can measure that.
For example, how the students feel when they're in school, how do they feel about their particular school, how do the parents feel about their relationship to the school, how the teachers feel within the school with each other and the administration and the central office, and just sort of that kind of relationship.
That's correct. And the data that's generated is both general data for the whole system and then disaggregated by school and then by subgroup, again, parents or other outside folks, teachers, staff members, and students.
So it's interesting. So you were really asking parents and students, staff, how they feel about how they feel.
That's right.
Basically,
That's right.
Trying to get an understanding about the school climate. And that, wow, that sounds like a very challenging task. Now, when did you begin this process?
Well, the process began in the summer, early summer. We gathered, I think, a real solid committee. Let me tell you who was on the committee. We had Janet Pauls, who is a principal at Churchill Elementary School. We have one of the middle school principals, Lee Viditz, who was a member. Teresa Farnell, who's an assistant principal at Sudlersville Middle School. We had Kennard Elementary School principal, Michelle Hampton. We had a teacher, Tom Walls. We had a Centerville Middle School assistant principal, Brian Kelly. We had another teacher, and then we had a parent, Annette DiMaggio, who's also a PTA, one of the PTA presidents. So we thought we had a nice representative group.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent committee, really, a good working group, and I'm sure, I mean, I can see your product. Let me show this. This is how many pages is this, Lloyd?
136.
136 pages, guys. So this, really a lot of work was obviously put into this document, into this standard. And so just talk a little bit about the process, if you don't mind. I mean, in other words, okay, so, you are the subcommittee chair, and you've got your committee. I mean, what did you do at your first meeting, and how did that go?
The first meeting was an organizational meeting. We met in July, I believe it was, end of July, and the beginning of July, I'm sorry. And the first thing to do is to take a look at Standard 6 and determine what was in there. And then we had to determine the indicators that were associated with that, and there were over 40 in that particular standard, in Standard 6. And then we had to review the possible data sources where we were going to get the information that would give us the answers to the questions that were asked. And then as the summer went on, we divided up those indicators up among our group, and we met throughout the fall to determine the data that was generated. And then we used several surveys, 4 surveys, and then several other data sources as well that were administered to parents, to students, and to staff, and including one that was put together by the Middle States people themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it helped us make decisions regarding the indicators. And finally, we compiled and revised those findings, and then we had to archive the data that would support the conclusions that we reached. So when we share that with the Middle States folks, we'll be able to justify our answers.
Mm-hmm. So these questions, I mean, when we look at these specific indicators and the questions, well, what are some examples of these indicators the indicators of excellence that were in your particular standard, ones that kind of, stand out for you?
Yes, some of the indicators, some examples indicators were included in the standard. All were tied to the climate, of course, because we mentioned that of the system, and we were able to find some pretty positive trends, and they can be summed up. And just to let me cite 3 examples. They can be summed up pretty succinctly. First, the data show that for example, for parents, 956 parents were surveyed using the Parent Climate Survey, and 94% of those respondents believe that the relationship between their child's teacher and other staff show respect and understand, parents, teachers understand and treat their students fairly. So that's one example of the questions that were asked.
So that's about what, 99%?
94%.
94%, okay.
And then when we get to students, students were asked if they feel teachers show respect and understand students,
Mm-hmm.
and 90% of the elementary students felt that they did,
Mm-hmm.
and about 76% of high school students felt that they did. So again, pretty positive results.
Right.
And then a third example, a climate survey asked staff if they felt their working environment promotes trust, support, and recognition for their accomplishments and contributions, and 81.3% of the staff agree with that statement. So these results are kind of indicative of A, that we have a pretty positive climate out there,
Mm-hmm.
and B, that all 3 groups, parents, staff, and students, are in agreement as reported through these several sources. So it's not that we have one group saying one thing and another group saying another thing.
Well, how do you think, and I totally agree with you, myself being in this county for a number of years, and being around to a lot of the schools, I would say that I would have to agree with your findings. Of course, I didn't do any of the research that you did and that kind of thing. But how did we get to that point where we have a school climate, where the kids feel respected, the teachers feel respected, the parents feel like their kids are coming home and giving them good messages about the school? Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think it's an ongoing process. I don't think you're ever finished doing that. And of course, you'd always like to have 100% answers, positive answers for all those questions. You probably won't get that, but you certainly want to do that. And we talk about the continuous improvement model that our system's been on the road with for several years. And I think that's certainly made a difference, because we're trying to constantly improve the students that leave our system and that they work within a positive kind of environment. So I think it starts with the Board of Ed and the superintendent, and it works its way all the way down through to the ranks. And I think everybody's committed to that. And if you're committed to that as a system, I think parents realize that, and they'll be on board with you and they'll work with you. And I think that's what's happened.
Mm-hmm. When I think of school climate, the first thing I think of is PBIS. And I don't know if there's any discussion about PBIS in your research. I certainly know that that's one of the goals of the program, is to improve the culture of the school. Do you think PBIS has had an impact on your findings?
It's not as quantifiable as some of these others, but absolutely I think it has. And I think all the schools now are on board with
Yes.
PBIS, am I
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, yeah, I think it certainly has made a difference. What you're trying to do with PBIS is be as positive as possible and proactive, as opposed to reactive and negative. And I think as a result of that, I think we have had a more positive kind of a school system.
And PBIS, I know many of you know this, but I'll just explain it anyway, stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. It is a a system that we have in place in all our schools for teaching, encouraging, acknowledging, and celebrating positive behavior in all students and recognizing staff. And I think it's had an impact on the school culture and the school climate in a number of schools. So we're very excited about that. And so that's why I think it's important to have that discussion in this discussion as well. Now, when you talk about things like data and documentation and the data pieces, you mentioned the surveys, and you talked about the surveys. Were there any? Go
Let me
ahead.
just take a moment to
Sure.
talk about those surveys
Sure.
because there were three major ones that we used.
Mm-hmm.
First, there was a parent climate survey. That's the one that we've been providing parents and completed by parents each spring for a number of years. And as I said, we had 956 parents, which is a pretty representative number of parents. For the teachers, we have something called, or the staff, not just teachers, but staff, Teaching, Empowering, Leading, and Learning, which is called, shorthand is TELL, the TELL survey, which is a state-developed instrument that gauges staff sentiment about the climate and the working conditions and how they're perceived by faculty members throughout the system. So that's one we use for staff members. And then for students, we have something called the Climate Survey for Students that we administer to students in grades 3 through 12. So that gives us a lot of data, and there are others, but they're the three major ones that we used. Gives us a lot of data that we think gives us a pretty accurate picture of what those three groups of folks are thinking and talking about.
Were there any other kind of documentation that you used, or was it primarily the surveys?
Those were the surveys. We also had, if you remember, we had a meeting that last February, a countywide meeting that was established to set goals and talk about priorities. And we had over, I think it was 120 some people that attended that. And they generated some data too that we used. Maybe not quite as comprehensive as some of the others, but it was a great source of reinforcement, and it enabled us to see exactly what other groups were thinking outside parents. We talked to business people and government officials within that group, so it helped us as well.
So as you looked over the standard, and would you say that your standard 6 that as you completed your self-study, were all the indicators met?
They were met. We felt very, very strongly that they were met, some better than others, but for the most part, in fact, in every case, we met them without exception. And in most cases, we were very, very high. The approval rates, for the most part, were in the 80 and 90th percentiles, which we think is very good.
And in any school system, there's no such thing as a perfect school system, and we know that nobody is, there are some, you can't please everybody, But would you say that there were any areas that you might want to take a look at in the future for improvement?
No, there were a couple of schools that were in a few isolated areas that were sort of outliers, and they will be addressed in the school improvement process, the school improvement plan process. But for the most part, 99% of the cases, we were in pretty much agreement, and that was a great thing to see. All the schools pretty much lined up, at least in about the same area, and the three groups that we talked about, and pretty close alignment as well. And that's very encouraging because you certainly don't want to have someone over here or someone over here that's not in sync, and that was not the case. So that was probably the biggest surprise for our group. We thought there would be a more disparate kind of answers, and we didn't get those. So that was good.
Yeah, and that's kind of my next question is you've been involved in the process now about 7 or 8 months, and you said you were surprised by what you just told me. What do you think? I mean, what would you say? What did you really learn from this that you didn't know before? You and your committee when you guys got together.
I'll tell you what I think we learned, that you can't rely on anecdotal information. You can't rely on people coming and talking to you, or isolated instances of what you think may be what the general population is thinking. When you do a survey and you have a lot of people participate, you think it's pretty accurate, you're going to get a pretty accurate information, data. If you rely on just the people you talk to or I talk to, you may not get that broad, more accurate picture. So that was probably the biggest surprise for me. Actually, the results were more positive than I thought they would be, because we tend to talk to people that maybe aren't as, have problems or have concerns, and that may not be the general attitude out there, but it is, if you're not careful, the one that you'll assume is correct.
And so now going forward, we have this information, and this is great information, and we're going to be working on, like you said, the continuous school improvement process. I'm very excited about this. I think getting this kind of information and this kind of data about our school climate it makes us all feel pretty good, makes us all feel very good. So when we know when the visiting team comes in late February, we'll have a lot of good news to share with them. Lloyd, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
No, except to say that we will be sharing that information with the Middle States folks that come in end of February, but we'll also be sharing that information with PTAs, with faculties, and in some cases with students as well, so they understand what the data looks like. I think it's important that it not be just an internal thing, but that we share that information with our neighbors and with our folks within the system as well.
Well, Lloyd, I want to thank you for all your hard work on this effort. It really was, it looks like you guys have done a great job, and I want to thank all the members of your committee. A lot of work was involved, and it's obvious you took this task on and you took it very seriously. I think that these results are going to speak very well of our system, and as we move forward, I think that we've really got something that we can build on. So I want to thank you for coming here today, and this concludes our segment on system climate and organization, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Okay.
Wasn't too bad.
Yeah, that was good.
We did okay.